Welcome to another conversation in People in Fundraising. This podcast features interviews with nonprofit professionals who discuss their career journeys, lessons learned, and enthusiasm for working in fundraising. And here's your host, the founder of People in Fundraising, Tim Wilson.
Good morning, everyone. This is Tim Wilson, the host and founder of the Professional Conversations webcast, People in Fundraising. Today is Wednesday, June 1st, 2022. And on this episode, I am very grateful and delighted to welcome Jessica McNeill from Harvard Business School to our program today. Hello, Jessica.
Hello, everyone. And you're saying June, and I can't believe it's June.
Yes.
Wrapping my head around where May went.
Well, and before I get into introducing you, I appreciate you taking time, in particular in June, given your role, where, as you'll share with us, there's quite a bit of activity as you wrap up the fiscal year with reunions as well. So
yeah, it's just a little busy around here, just a tad bit. I might have worked 7 days last week, but who's counting?
Awesome. Well, thank you, Jessica. Jessica is currently the Assistant Director of Reunion and Leadership Giving at Harvard Business School. As she shared with me before we went live, staff at the business school are in the office where Jessica is today, joining us 2 days a week at least, and some flexibility outside of that. So delighted to have you here and great to see you again, Jessica.
Yes, it's great. I'm happy to be here and I'm excited. It's going to be a great conversation.
Yeah, thank you. And for the eagle eyes in the audience, you may see this sign here, Bridgewater State University. Jessica's going to talk about her affiliation with that institution as we get into the conversation, and I'll talk and add my affiliation at that point as well, but it holds a special place in my heart. So
no, I love that. I have nothing Bridgewater in the office. My Bridgewater mug is at home. I should have had a prop, but I wasn't even thinking. Too concerned about what top to wear.
You know, if I had more digital tech skills, I could maybe like add a mug or, you know, a
mug, a little logo or something.
Yeah.
I should have had a virtual background.
I'm a one-person shop, and this is about the expertise I have. So thank you.
No, I appreciate that. I love that.
Yeah. Well, Jessica, thank you for your time today in advance and for the questions we'll go through. A lot of them will touch on your specific role at Harvard Business School. I do want to talk a little bit about your studies and affiliations with your alma mater as well. Yeah. So as we get into this conversation, just to kick us off, if you could please describe your current role at Harvard Business School, and then let's talk about how you entered the field of philanthropy, and then we'll pivot from those first conversations.
Yeah, so my current role, I said it's a mouthful of a title, Assistant Director of Reunion and Leadership Giving, which in some shops, advancement, they might call it class officer. So basically, my focus is fundraising for reunion campaigns. So right now I work with the 40th reunion cohort. So that's classes, early 80s. It started to like 81, goes to 84, which at HBS are powerhouse classes with lots of big names. I won't name drop, but they're big names. And have great affinity for the school. So working with those classes is interesting. It's kind of twofold. So it's campaign management, which is volunteer recruitment, volunteer management, helping with their solicitations. And then the other part is the reunion, the leadership giving kind of focus. So we used to have a leadership giving team. They kind of got rid of that team and then merged it in with the reunion base. So we do a little bit of both. We do have our classes. Again, I have 4. Like 600, 700 in each. So you could do the math. That's like 2,800 people. But within that, we have portfolios too. So we pull out gems from those, and then we like do what a leadership gift officer, like major gift officer, would do within the leadership level. So it's twofold. It's a nice blend. it's great experience, like the, actual solicitation and campaign management. So that's the quick and dirty of what I do. And we are a reunion focus shop, I would say. Reunion, people come back. That's where you see people make their big gifts at. And of course, they'll do like their annual giving, but some people hold out until their reunion to make their big gifts. So reunion focus shop. So you can imagine, and we could get into this a little later, but how the impact of not having reunions in person then affected the fundraising. Yeah, so that's interesting, but we could get into that a little later. But how I got into fundraising in general, I guess we should start from the beginning. So I went to Bridgewater State. I was a communications major.
Okay.
Thought I was going to be a journalist off in New York somewhere, a magazine editor, something like that. But I was a PR minor. So I had to do, courses related to that. And one course was a press release or a PR writing course I had to take. And you had to do an internship. So I found my internship. I went to this nonprofit in Brockton, which is close to Bridgewater. And it was a development internship.
Oh,
and I was
interesting.
Like, and it said something about newsletter. I'm like, well, that sounds like PR writing. So if I could do my course requirement, I'll do whatever this development stuff is. I had no clue what it was. And that's when, so I was doing my PR writing, but then they're like, can you help us get donations for our big fundraiser? And I had to get sponsorships. They wanted me going out to the local businesses and giving sponsorship packages. And I remember at the time, it's so funny. The levels of the packages were like $10,000, $25,000. I'm new. I'm like, they're asking these people for this much money. I didn't know this how it worked. I was like, whoa, this is bold. I had no clue what I was doing, but I'm like, okay, I guess I'll go here and try to get some sponsorships and even simple things like family night. They're like, we need donations of pizza. Can you call people? And ask for free pizzas? Like, they're just gonna give us free stuff. So I like typed up this whole little, I don't know, about the organization, all this. And I called the guy at Domino's and made my little pitch. He like invited me in. We got 25 pizzas. I'm like, I guess this is
all right.
So I worked their event. And so, so it was then that I was introduced to what development was. And then I did that my whole senior year. So then now my experience, we're about to graduate, is like this development stuff. So I started looking for development positions. I worked at Father Bill's in Mainspring. Also, it was in Quincy, they're in Brockton now. I think they're in both locations, but so then I got a summer internship there. And I'm like, okay, now I need like a job after I graduate, like a real job.
Yes.
And I tried the communications thing, but I was like, okay, my experience now is in this development thing, whatever it is.
Sure.
So I started going for those roles, which is how I landed at Horizons for Homeless Children. And that, I mean, small shop fundraising is completely different than higher ed fundraising. So stayed there for a year and it was great. They just like throw you in the fire, you figure it out. But being right out of school, I did want to learn like the basics of fundraising, like how things should go. You don't always get that in a smaller shop. So
sure.
I said, let me go to like a different institution. And then I went big. And
you went the opposite extreme.
I did. It didn't even, at that time, I don't think I realized that like higher ed institutions did fundraising. It was just something I never thought of. So I'm like, oh, okay. And even when I was applying to like hospitals, I'm like, they do fundraising too. It was like this whole realm that I never knew. So came to HBS and 6.5 years later, here I am.
Awesome. It is fascinating when you have, and I had that experience too, like, oh my goodness, like this is a completely unknown to me until now part of how these institutions operate. And it was intriguing, but also like, why did I never think about it at the time that I was at college or what have you? But that is, I'm glad you,
because there's no studies for it there. I mean, now there are, but at that time, so It's 2010, I went to college. Like there wasn't any thing that you could like major in fundraising or something.
Right.
It was communications is probably the closest exposure that you would get to it. So people ask me like, you went to school for fundraising? And I'm like, no, I did not.
Yes.
So then for a while, I thought my degree was not connected. I'm like, wait, I communicate every day. Okay, I'm using my degree.
Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, it's funny how that works.
Whether you're writing or making phone calls, what have you, you are putting that degree to use.
Yeah, meeting with the alums, it's all there. It's all relationship communication. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you I like how you mentioned it's a quick and dirty synopsis, but it was very interesting. So Jessica, you touched on this, describing your current role with Reunion and Leadership Giving. So if you could expand on that for our audience in the context of raising money and engaging with alumni and having the experience of doing that in person before the pandemic. And then what was that like during the pandemic and coming out of it? What have you learned, and what has that experience been like?
Yes, so I transitioned. So my current role, which is what they would call a frontline fundraiser role, I transitioned to that during the pandemic. So I started the pandemic still in a support role, development coordinator, and I was managing some classes, the older classes, like the 55th reunion, the 60th reunion. So I was getting a little bit of it, but it was clear like my focus was not frontline fundraising. It was still these support roles and supporting other frontline fundraisers. So it was during the pandemic that I made the transition to this role.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which is, you're supposed to be out on the road. You're supposed to be meeting with people face to face, and there's none of that. So
yes.
that doesn't exist any longer. And you're not traveling, which a part of that was like a little intriguing. It's a backstory. I never thought I was going to be a frontline fundraiser. I wanted to do prospect research or like donor relations.
Oh, interesting.
Those are my realms. So when I was adamant I didn't want to do frontline fundraising. So when cause part of it, travel, it's nice. I'm a homebody, so I need a balance. So in a way, the pandemic, I was like, oh, I can meet on Zoom. This is great.
Oh, good.
I can meet people on Zoom, but it was still challenging because what I have seen of the role was people doing it in person.
Yeah.
And it's just not that same pace. It's hard to get Zoom meetings sometimes.
Sure.
You're trying to get people to pay attention by this point. So that was probably like 2020? Maybe somewhere in there. But like it was getting to the point where people were Zoomed out. Yeah. Nobody wants to meet with you on Zoom anymore. So it was like fun when we first started. People were like, what's this technology? And then by the time I came around, it's like, no, we don't want to meet on Zoom. So that was tough. Because you're supposed to get out there and you're supposed to meet with alumni. But then on the flip side of that, the ones that do take your meetings, I can talk to people in Paris.
Yeah.
Given my role, unless there's an event, I'm not going to Paris. But because of Zoom, I can talk to volunteers and alumni that are in these different countries. So that was a sweet spot of it. But it is challenging. And even as we're coming out of it, we have to get back on the road.
Yeah.
Which, again, if you're a homebody, you're nice and comfortable with Zoom, but you do have to get back on the road. And then you're in this balance where now people almost don't want to take your in-person meetings because Zoom is so much quicker.
Oh, sure.
So a Zoom meeting, you could say, can I have 30 minutes of your time? It's boom, they can do it, hop on another meeting quick. In person, it's like, I got to get to the location. We have to sit and have coffee. And now it becomes a 2 hour of their time.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So like, that's the interesting piece. And people have relocated. So you reach out to people, you think are in Chicago. They're like, I'm in London now. So, so it's been a little tricky to navigate. So again, I came into the role during the pandemic. November, I went to New York, and then I went to Chicago the beginning of, not this month because it's now June, in May. And those are my first kind of like meetings on the road, doing it by myself. And so that
how was that?
It was a little nerve-wracking. I've never been to Chicago. I'm like, this is a new city. Do I know where I'm going? Trying to set up the meetings. I'm like, I don't know what's the distance between the logistics of it.
Right.
But no, it was great. Once I got there, I met with the alumni.
Do you use any fundraising specific apps, like Evertrue or others, like to navigate and pull up, first to navigate to the location, but also to pull up the donor or prospects information they're giving if they have been a donor, things like that? Or
oh no, what is this thing that you mentioned? What is that app called?
Oh well, no, I don't have the app either, but I know that my current employer, Weber State University, we use a vendor, and one of their services is an app where you can just pull up the donor or prospects information.
Oh, we have the HBS app with the alumni directory. Maybe I should use that instead of killing trees.
Oh, there you go.
We're still very old school in that way. We still work with our development assistants to, pull the information from our system, our prospect cards, and you print out. It's funny because you think the pandemic would have changed that.
Sure.
But I think people miss paper. You're like, I can print these things to leave with them. But then there are times I'm like, I don't need this paper. And I did find that in Chicago. I'm like, now I just have all these things on this person where I look up their LinkedIn. I'm like, I could use the alumni directory.
Right.
I should try to go paperless. I should try that.
Goal for the rest of the year.
I'm going to write that down because I like that if I don't have to lug the folders around. And see, I think that goes back to like you're doing it how you did it pre-pandemic, and maybe those ways don't work anymore.
Yeah. So if you could touch on that a bit more, what have you learned through being, literally new to your role during the pandemic, and now as we're hopefully transitioning out of it, and you mentioned you did individual meetings. What are the things that you professionally or personally have learned through the last 2 years of experience in different settings, Zoom and in person, that you think you would like to have it be a permanent part of how you approach engaging with alumni?
That's a good one. I would say during the pandemic, so we did, and maybe other shops did it, we ramped up our alumni programming. And we had lots of virtual events and things of that sort, which is a good way to like engage with your volunteers or with the alumni, and kind of you get a sense of what they're interested in. So even the ones that are Zoomed out, I see you're signing up for this. So it's helpful to get a sense of what they're coming to, and they can do more of them than, the ones that were in person. So I use that, and that's super helpful to me. Engaging their thing. And even if I meet with them in person, it's like, hey, did you know we have these virtual events? So it's almost another way, like the virtual piece of it still being there is a way to keep them connected and engaged in a different way. I've met with alumni who, they might not have came to certain events, or might not have even been invited to certain events in person because, they pull these lists together from, our top donors, our top volunteers, and how we invite people is a little different versus when it's virtual. It's like, hey, all alumni come to this. So there's more things for them to engage with and things that I can follow up. So I see the engagement piece with the alumni. The virtual is helping. So that's something that I'm glad we implemented during the pandemic, and we were trying to get there, but I think the pandemic got us there faster.
Sure.
Because we had no choice.
Yeah.
And now it's here to stay. So it's a different level of engagement that you're seeing. And even if I meet with somebody in person, I can have like follow-up Zoom meetings in between that time. So say I can only get to Chicago once a year, every 2 years. I can connect with them through this virtual platform in between that time. So there's not that pressure. Like I can't get to California every 6 weeks or every 3 weeks, but I can connect with you and then we can connect on Zoom. So it's a blend. You have more options, which I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I want to follow up on, and feel free to share what you feel comfortable sharing. I know a lot of fundraising departments have a visit or a contact metric.
Mm-hmm.
X number of visits with prospects and donors per year. If you want to share a little bit of what HBS's metric is in that regard, and is there a blend? You need X number of in-person versus X number of Zoom to count?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I came into this role, it was 75. I think that's what we're holding steady, at least for our role. The major gift officers have different metrics, but ours is 75.
Okay.
And that was a concern. It's during a pandemic. How am I getting 75 visits?
Yeah.
Sometimes the Zoom is 15 minutes. Does that count?
Right.
So that's something with my manager I'm constantly trying to get clarity on. What counts and what doesn't count. So they don't separate it, only 40% could be Zoom meetings. It's really whatever connection you have that is meaningful.
Okay.
Even phone calls can count sometimes because you can get a lot of information on just a regular, old-fashioned telephone.
Sure.
I've sat with alumni on the phone for an hour.
Okay.
And it's a conversation that's, counted as a meeting. So there's that flexibility. And I'm thankful to my manager for that. And even, you hit those metrics, but understanding with the pandemic that it's different. So you might not, quite hit the 75, but from the visit you had, maybe that person, this is the largest gift they ever gave to HBS, finding those small wins. And I was at a networking event actually last week and speaking with the lady, and we were talking about metrics. She's like, you need to think about those small kind of wins within that. Did that person increase their giving? And I was like, it's a good question. So now that's on my list to do, to see if I have any first-time donors.
Okay.
If I spoke with them and maybe that got them to increase their giving because somebody paid attention to them. So those small wins within that metric is how I'm going to think about it. And I'm going to tell my manager and hopefully she agrees.
Fingers crossed. Yes.
Yeah. But no, it could be daunting. I look at, positions in other places, like you need 150. I'm like, do repeats count? Are these 150 new people?
Yep.
But then you don't want to hit it for the, the sake of doing it. Of course, it's a metric and something you aspire to, but if 50 is what you got to and those are meaningful, to me, that's a win. Not just doing it for the sake of reaching the 75, but.
Right. Yeah. The lingo I've heard in my last two places is substantive. It's
exactly.
Yeah. It's more than just bumping into them at athletic events and asking how their family is doing. It's conversation was leading to a purpose, an objective.
Exactly.
Leading ultimately to a gift, hopefully. Yeah.
And those things take time. So that's how I think about it. And hopefully my manager would agree, because where I look at my metrics in my mind, close to 75 right now. Oh, is it in a fiscal year? And then she did tell me that showing that you reached out to people. Sometimes you reach out to people 3-4 times and they just aren't responsive. So I'm putting in the effort.
Yes.
I'm reaching out, but you can't make people meet with you, sadly. So
right.
That balance of showing that there's effort there.
Yeah. Well, that's terrific. Thank you for explaining more in detail about what you've learned in the role you've had since the pandemic began. And I hope that you mentioned before we went live that you have a series of reunions on campus coming up. So I hope those go off well. And knowing HBS, they typically are, tremendous events. So
they are great. We just had the makeup 1 year. Well, I guess 2021, it would have been their actual 1 year, but it was the class of 2020 and 2021 back for their 1 year reunion this past weekend.
Cool.
So that was exciting. And we have some this coming weekend. We have the older classes coming back on the 7th and the 8th in the middle of the week. And then we have another set coming back. It's full steam ahead, but reunions is our bread and butter. We're reunion focused. So
yeah, absolutely.
Hopefully some gifts come rolling in because people have such a good time at reunion.
And if you could talk a little bit, because I know from staffing reunion events, I'm not I never have been on the frontline side, but I know that people in your position, they have time dedicated to meet one-on-one with people at reunions as well. Is that still happening?
It's still happening. We
Okay.
have that going. We've identified prospects that are coming back for the reunion that we think would be either suited for a meeting with senior leadership or somebody that we want to connect with. And ours is a little more informal. It could be an actual meeting, or, hey, I'm gonna be around here. I see you have a break in the day, and meet them for coffee, or something
okay.
simple, just to put a face to a name. So it's sometimes not as structured, but then there are times you're staffing, the dean or some other senior leadership. So there are those opportunities to meet one-on-one. I said you grab them because when their break-in the day is gonna be. But then also they're not here for us. So sometimes that is tricky.
Yeah.
Unless, like the dean, yes, a meeting with us, they might pass up because they want to see their friends. They want to.
Sure.
So that's why the coffee, hey, quick hi, you having fun? Everything's great, and keep it moving. And then put a face to a name, follow up after, and then maybe they want to make a nice gift.
Right.
Remember I seen you on campus? Did you have fun? That kind of thing. No, but they're good. Like here for their classmates and their section mates and the faculty.
Yeah. A lot of networking going on.
Oh yeah. I can imagine like business deals. I'm like, what are they up to? Sure.
Yeah. Well, speaking of networking, I use that word deliberately because it's getting to my next question. So one reason why, among the several, I wanted to have you on the program today, Jessica, is you are a great presence on LinkedIn, with either with your own posts or sharing organizations that you either are a member of, or you just find something that's of interest that they're sharing and you reshare the posts. And some of the accounts that I've seen from following you that you share or you react to are the Women of Color in Fundraising. And I'm looking at my notes because I want to make sure.
It's a long name.
I want to get the titles right.
Exactly.
The Women of Color in Philanthropy and Fundraising. I actually inverted it. Let's try that again. The Women of Color in Fundraising and Philanthropy.
There we go.
There we go. And the Women in Development, those organizations. As a young professional, what has been most helpful to you as you associate with these organizations, whether it's just virtually or if you are a member, if they've had events, again, in person or virtually?
Yeah.
And do you see yourself becoming more involved as time allows in the future?
So it was a funny thing that came up. So I'll backtrack a little bit. So Women in Development of Greater Boston is something I found out when I was at Horizons.
Okay.
And I realized early on, I'm like, this is a lot of, this seems like a circle that I should be in, because I want to network and move up, and people at Horizons and Development were a part of it. And so I thought about it. And again, I was new, so I probably didn't have money to pay a membership, but I would go to the event that I could go to. And then I moved to HBS, and it was tricky because a lot of those organizations are like smaller social service organizations, not so many higher ed, you do see it, but the fundraising that you do in those shops is different than the fundraising that you do in a higher ed institution. So it's not like case where you're like meeting people who are like your peers.
Yeah.
It's a lot different. Even when you talk about like their annual giving, the numbers are different than a Harvard Business School's annual
right.
So at first I was like, is this going to be a place for me? But I'm like, no, I need to be there. I need to network, and, you never know where you end up. So I joined, I became a member. During the pandemic is when I really did more networking during the pandemic than before. It was easy. I could just click the link and
right.
You don't have to like, oh, this thing's in the morning. Can I like get to work a little later, or it's in the evening and maybe I have time? It was so much easier to do the networking. So I became a member of WID during the pandemic. And then Women of Color and Fundraising and Philanthropy, which is, they pronounce it as woke. My boyfriend was like, he's like, walk? I'm like, it's woke. That's what WOC. So I came across them during the pandemic. And I think it was that need and people wanted that connection piece.
Sure.
And again, coming into this role, there are lots of women in fundraising, women of color. That's not something that I had necessarily seen.
Okay.
Even within WID, I noticed, I'm like, maybe there's a handful of us. I'm like, oh, this is a special network.
Yeah.
Because the challenges that you face as a fundraiser of color are a little different, especially when you get to thinking of some of these DEI things. You just come at it from a different lens.
Sure.
And being new to the frontline fundraising field, I wanted to connect with other fundraisers of color. So I started going, all of their things were virtual when they started. Started going to their events, connecting. They had virtual symposiums. It was great. They sent little goodie boxes. I like goodies. And then actually Woke just had a networking event last week that was in person. They're doing kind of these tours to different cities. So they came to Boston. Yes.
Cool.
So I got to meet great women, make great connections. And then some of them are part of WID. So it all like intersects.
Nice.
Perfectly. But no, it's been making connections locally and then in other states. I've connected with people at institutions across the country. So that's amazing. And just learning what other places are doing, and especially as it relates to DEI. And a lot of that comes with the programming that Woke does. So yeah, no, I love them and it's great. And am I going to be more involved? I will be. So with WID, I just got invited to be a member of their membership committee. So
nice.
I will be, starting, I guess it's June. Maybe I'm starting now. I think I have a meeting.
Well, it could be today, Jessica.
Right? So I am a member of their membership committee, and I was just honored that they asked me to be a part of it. I actually recruited one of my friends a few months ago. So I was kind of doing the work a little bit. But yeah, no, definitely more involved with them. And it's two great organizations to be a part of. And they have great content on LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And you mentioned, so it sounds like Woke is nationwide and Women in Development has a Boston.
Yeah, they have a Boston branch, and they have some in like New York, other cities as well, but Greater Boston is where I'm focused at.
Yeah, so for these organizations to have, a local, regional, national footprint, and like you said, to find them on LinkedIn, and for people like me, where I'm not a frontline fundraiser, I'm not a person of color, but to see people that I know in my network react to what these organizations are doing and sharing is also enlightening.
Yeah, it's great to see. LinkedIn is an interesting place. I have been intentional about being active on LinkedIn.
That's good. And if I could follow up, you mentioned in talking about Woke and WID, you mentioned particular challenges that people of color who work in fundraising experience. And I wondered if you wanted to, share a little bit more about that those challenges that you see or maybe have experienced.
Yeah, it's interesting. Again, it's very fundraising philanthropy is a very woman-dominated industry. When you're thinking being a person of color, I'm very mindful of how I come and how I'm presented to the donors. Jessica McNeill, I'm just gonna say, it doesn't sound like it's gonna be a Black person when you meet with them, Sometimes you find that they don't always know. You do a lot of correspondence over email, and then they meet you, and it's kind of, whoa. And I've had those interactions that are like, whoa. I've had alumni say to me, wow, you're nothing like I thought you were gonna look. I thought you were gonna be Irish with red hair. You get those kind of things. And just navigating those, and you have how you personally want to respond to it, and then how your professional side has to respond to it. Sure. And you're always like toggling between these two things. I'm always mindful. I am a young Black woman, and a lot of the alumni that I speak to Harvard Business School, the cohort is the 40th reunion. They are older white men.
Yeah.
There's that, dynamic, the woman dynamic, but then the race dynamic. And then you have me coming into it during this whole, I guess you call it like a racial reckoning sort of thing.
Sure.
And you don't always know which end of the spectrum people are on. And when you think of DEI efforts and talking about fundraising for that, it's your personal. And so it's always this fine line that you're walking. And woke was great because you need that support system of people that have experienced that. So yeah, that's a little, it's challenging. I will say that. But for the most part, you have all the alumni are great. I've been fortunate to engage with a Black alumni in the 40th cohort who are super surprised. Wow, we have a Black person at HBS. And those conversations have been great, and just talking to them about our racial equity plan and hearing their experiences, and they're happy to have somebody listen to them. So those has been special. So I'm trying to use the role that I'm in now to then do DEI work through that. And so it's been interesting. It's energizing.
That's good. Thank you for sharing that. I know it can be, and probably even exhibiting it now. Like it's a sensitive topic, and I think some people don't know the right lingo. They want to be allies and helpful, and I appreciate you touching on that a little bit more. And
it's an interesting realm, but no, I'm happy to do it. Happy to talk about it. I was on the Dean's Anti-Racism Task Force here at HBS. That helped create the racial equity plan. Our department actually has a racial equity group.
Cool.
I sat back a year on that to see what they're going to do, but they're doing great work. So I joined. After that. We have a Black Staff Affinity group now that is
nice.
a year old. So yeah, it's great work and it's hard conversations, but they need to be had, and happy to be at an institution that's kind of moving those conversations forward. So it's great.
That's good. Yeah. And one of the questions I wanted to ask about, and you just mentioned it, Jessica, was your involvement with the Dean's Anti-Racism Task Force. And I know I'm a researcher. I did a little bit of research.
Did you read the whole plan? The racial equity plan?
I did not, but
that's fine. I won't charge it against.
But I researched, what questions may be most interesting to you, and I do that with other people I talk with, and that's when I literally Googled Jessica McNeill and HBS, and you gave an interview that's published, I think it was last month, where you talked in good detail and length about your involvement with the Anti-Racism Task Force. So if you want to mention where that is, and then if you want to talk what that work looked like, and for you to be involved with the Anti-Racism Task Force, I wanted to give that preface. So if you don't, say what you'd like to say, please, and don't worry about being redundant if information's already out online. So just whatever you want to say about that would be awesome.
So it's funny. It was part of WID's newsletter, and they asked me to be a face of WID in a spotlight. And again, I was honored to this is great. And I, answered the questions. It came out last week. I kind of forgot it was going to come out. And everybody starts texting me and sending me messages. You're in the newsletter. It got to my mother. And she sent me an email. And was like, you're in this newsletter? I was like, oh yeah, it's been a whirlwind. I forgot almost I did it. I was like, oh gosh, what did I say? But no, it was great. So yeah, I mentioned, so there, again, in 2020, like a lot of institutions started doing these racial reckonings, and, how the institutions have, addressed racial inequality and just really looking inward. And HBS did that. And they came up with the Dean's Anti-Racism Task Force. There were 7 work streams. I specifically sat on the staff work stream. So they There were, at the time, I think it was like 52 Black staff members, and they called us all together, which was amazing because I had never connected with some of these other Black staff at HBS because they're not in my department. So I was like, wow, look at, there's some of us here. So that was a great opportunity, but really they just got our feedback. How can we find ways to attract Black talent? How did you come to HBS? How can we keep Black talent engaged, and how can we retain? And so that was a lot of my focus on the task force, was from the staff lens of things, which then from all of that came the Black Staff Affinity Group, which I'm a member of. So it was great to be a part of that. And, you know, you think about, it's a school, so you think about the students and you think about the faculty, and it's a business school, so you think about diversifying case protagonists, but there are also the people that work there every day. And like, what's their experience? So no, it was eye-opening. It was very eye-opening. I knew that our number was probably limited. It was a little surprising how few of us there were.
Sure.
So then of course you're like, we need to get more. How do we get more? So that was interesting work on that. And then, so all of those work streams, and people can probably find it on the HBS site, but they're different. There's one for, you know, that focuses on the case protagonist. There's ones that focus on faculty research. So all of that then goes to the racial equity plan and how are we going to get this work done. So we're kind of like the brainstorming, and we submitted recommendations, and then they use those recommendations to come up with the plan.
Interesting.
So it was great to be a part of it and feel like, you know, your voice was heard, and, you know, they had to select people to be members of it, and so I was happy I was able to represent especially our department. It was great. It was honored. But so now it's taking that plan, and it's one thing to write it, then you got to implement it, and then you have to explain the plan to your alumni base. And of course, you know, there's fundraising efforts around that. So within our HBS fund, we have a DEI bucket. So then it's trying to get the feedback from alumni, and do you have thoughts on a plan? What do you think about it? And everybody has different thoughts. And I specifically have been trying to engage with the Black alumni, like, what do you think about this? Which is always interesting. Some of them, it's super like, great. But as you can imagine, it's like, okay, it's like some action, some metrics, rightfully so. So those conversations, just trying to articulate what the plan is, and you know, where the school is going. And you're not going to please everyone, and everyone's not going to be happy. But it's great work, and the school is doing great with keeping ourselves accountable to it. And I mean, we've definitely made progress over the past 2 years.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. That's good.
But there's still so much more work to do. So much work to do. Like, one thing that eventually I want to find a way to really incorporate, you know, the fundraising piece and the DEI, like merge them somehow. And I don't know, fundraising specifically for DEI efforts, I don't know, speaking it into existence, but something where we're being intentional about philanthropy around these efforts is a big vision, what I would like to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to talk with you offline, because our institution's doing some strategic initiatives. I know that, and again, this is more from the prospect management lens, but partnering with frontline folks like you, there are several institutions that just in the last few weeks have hired or promoted people into new positions where they're doing prospect management and research solely on.
I've heard about that. It sounds super interesting. I tell you, I wanted to be in prospect research. Because it's the pipeline. Like, you all find all this research and then put the people in the portfolio. So it's almost like it starts there a little bit before we even talk to them. So even thinking about how we like diversify portfolio's instead of talking to the same special friends of the school, you have to talk to the other ones. And there's so many people out there. So it kind of does start with your work, huh?
Yeah, it can. Just, you know, possibly.
It all works together, you know?
Well, and that's a nice segue. As we're getting close to the hour here, I want to get to a few other questions. And one of them is, you've been at Harvard Business School now for just over 6 years, Jessica.
Yes.
And I mentioned too, like it's a terrific sign that you have been promoted repeatedly from a staff assistant supporting frontline fundraisers to now your current role. You've also talked at the beginning of this interview about seeing yourself in donor relations and prospect research as well. So with the track record you've had as a young professional and your skill set and also your interests, where do you see yourself in in the next 6 years from now?
Well, see, that's hard because, again, I didn't see myself as a fundraiser 6 years ago. So I'm sure there's things that I say I don't see myself in, that who knows, but long term, and maybe by 6 more years, I'll kind of be there. I've always thought about consulting. So one of my plans is always like come to HBS, learn all I can know, and then go back and help the smaller shops. And there's so many nonprofits, and they might not always have the budget for the development work. So if there's a way that I can do consulting and go back and help those organizations, I think that would be great. So I could see hopefully in the next 5-6 years, it's something I can get off the ground.
Sure.
And then, as I mentioned, like something that merges like DEI initiatives in fundraising and philanthropy and being intentional about that. I don't know what that would look like. There's some institutions doing things like that, but I don't know if there's some way to, like, special initiatives, maybe that's what they would call it, or something like that. But somewhere, because I do like fundraising. Even though it's not where I thought I was going to be, I do like it. So finding something that like blends my two interests would be great. So I don't know if I would. I used to want to be a executive director of a nonprofit. I think I changed my mind on that.
Okay.
I wanted to start a nonprofit. Then I got my master's. I'm like, you have to do all this to start a nonprofit? 501c what? No, never mind. I'll just find an organization and be an executive director. But who knows? Who knows?
You're still relatively young in your career, and I didn't know you had a master's degree, so kudos on that too.
I do.
I think you're being strategic and smart about pondering and trying to evaluate what do you want to do, and could it be being executive director of an established nonprofit? Could it be consulting? Could it be, and maybe it sounds a little daunting right now, but maybe in time starting your own nonprofit, as you mentioned. So
it's all about keeping options open. Like I find that I kind of go, even if I think back to how I got into development, it's like going where like the experiences kind of lead me. So I have a plan, but just being open and fluid to just going with the flow, because you never know what opportunities come about from anywhere. I mean, I didn't think I'd be in higher ed, and I kind of like it here. It's a nice place to be.
Well, and that's a great segue to our last question, talking about you didn't think you'd be in higher education, didn't think about fundraising. Let's go back to your alma mater here, Bridgewater State University. Is there anything particular about your time there or place on campus that has special meaning for you? Is there anything that helped you launch your career? Anything about your ties to your alma mater that you'd like to share?
I could talk all day about Bridgewater. So if any Bridgewater people listen, Bridgewater has a special place in my heart. If I could go back to campus, I would. I try to get my little brother to go, but he's gone to American University, which is great.
Okay.
But no, I do love Bridgewater. I was very involved when I was on campus. I was a student leader, involved in all organizations. I was on newspaper. I did radio. I just took advantage of all that the campus had to offer. I wish I would have did it in 5 years so I could do a little more. But I was really engaged. I worked in, now called university events, but I was a student event planner. So I connected with faculty and staff, and the staff there is special. I'm sure everybody says that about every institution, but it is The staff are really special at Bridgewater. So I was super involved on campus. And as I became an alumni, because you're involved, then when they need people to come back, it's like, oh yeah, Jessica was involved with that. So I've probably been back to campus for something, probably every year since I graduated. That was 2014. And then I got involved with the Young Alumni Council that they started.
Cool.
And that was right before the pandemic. And then the pandemic kind of, you got to like recalibrate and think about things. But Bridgewater is a very, very special place. I love it. My favorite place on campus. It's probably cliche, but like Boyd and Quad, because it's just the quad. And
yes.
It looks nice in the snow. It looks nice in the fall, a spring day. That's your introduction when you're on campus as a freshman. So the quad, but
yeah.
If I'm thinking inside, I would say it used to be called the Center for Multicultural Affairs. Now it's called the Lewis and Gaines Center for Inclusion and Equity. But that space, when I went to Bridgewater, there weren't as many students of color. So it was like that homey space where everyone was together and you made those friendships and you felt supported. And a lot of the friendships I made through there, you're still friends with those people. So internally, awesome. It would be that space and that. Yes, see the quad?
Yes, that's beautiful.
It's just like a beautiful place. It makes me happy. So yeah, love Bridgewater. Will definitely be involved in a greater capacity soon. Might be some awesome. Announcements. I don't know if it's supposed to be a big announcement, so I don't know if I can say.
Hey, well, why you hold off on that, and maybe we can circle back in another interview. I'd love to hear more when you're ready, but this is how I remembered it. So for me, my heart also has a big place for Bridgewater State because I grew up. My home is about a block south of the quad.
See?
And my dad worked in this building for many years. He just retired after years at Bridgewater, and his entire career was at Bridgewater. He also worked over here in Harrington Hall.
In Harrington? Oh, it's like on the outskirts, such an old building.
Yes. And he would take me and my sister to Harrington Hall on the weekends when we were younger. I think just to give my mom a break from us. And we'd have the run of the classrooms and the whiteboards and whatnot. So I love Bridgewater as well. It's a beautiful campus. I've seen quite a few campuses, professionally, personally, and of course I'm biased because I grew up right next to it. But I honestly can say that taking that background out, I still think it's one of the most beautiful campuses I've ever visited or seen.
It's so nice. And have you been back lately? There's like new buildings and there's lots of new things there.
I have not been back probably, goodness. Now I'm trying to stop sharing my screen. There we go. No one needs to see my screensaver of my kids with lawn bags as a costume. I have not been back in about a year, and even then it was in the summer and it was the pandemic. I know they're revitalizing the space between the Maxwell Library and the Performing Arts Center. There used to be like fountains there.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I can see that needing a little sprucing up.
Yeah.
And then that big park, like University Park now, it used to be like the big parking lot near the commuter rail.
Yes. Yeah.
And now it's like a beautiful park. I remember when I started, I'm like, oh, this is like a random parking lot in the middle of campus, but the beautiful park now. Oh, and there's also, I don't know if it's my favorite, but it's like this little pathway. And there's like this little, I don't even know if it's a pond or stream, if you're trying to get from one side of campus to another. I don't think it really has a name, but it gets you to Moakley Center. It's like a little cutway. Yeah.
I know that cutway. Yes. Yeah.
It's like a little like pond. It's a cute little random shortcut.
And so that has been there forever. And I'm dating myself because I attended kindergarten at the Burnell building,
Oh,
which is
really?
which is attached to Mobley.
Yeah.
And I don't think it happened very often, but I do know that at least a couple of times I would walk through campus over the footbridge that went over the commuter rail.
Oh.
This was a long time ago, Jessica.
I'm like, that I didn't know.
Yeah, it was a scary, rickety steel footbridge. It was about 4 stories tall, no kidding. And that was before the commuter rail came to campus. And so I'd go over the footbridge with neighborhood kids and, of course, some parents. And then you go down to that massive parking lot you talked about.
Yep.
And then the cut through to Burnell.
That's so funny. It sounds like it's a good thing they took the bridge down. It sounds like it wasn't good looking.
No, it was an eyesore.
Yeah. But no, it's a special place. So yeah, I will definitely keep you posted on the announcement that I don't know if I should say yet. I definitely will be more involved with Bridgewater.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that.
Very near future.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I'm thrilled for you. I don't know what it is, but I'm thrilled for you.
It's like a cliffhanger. Like, look at, I'm leaving them with. Everyone's gonna want to know what it is. So watch my LinkedIn.
Well, that's awesome. And I think, not being an alum, but being, someone who spent the first 18 years of my life there and have been around the campus forever. I'm grateful for people like you who want to give back to that institution. Yeah. So good luck with that. And I wish you the best. Whatever this announcement is.
Whatever it is.
and maybe, do you know Ellen Cuddle Oliver?
Yes.
Okay. So she's someone else I'd like to have on this series at some point. But I also, again, I think now with this other news too, I think I'd love to have you back on at some point to talk more about some of the topics we touched on and just see how your career has gone. If in the next 6 years, if I'm still doing this, but in the next 6 years, where have you deliberately and sometimes things happen and it fall into people's laps? What opportunities have come up for you? I think it'd be great to circle back with you, Jessica.
It would be great, and I would be happy to come back. Yeah, Ellen would be a great person to have on. Yeah, our paths was definitely crossed with my engagement with Bridgewater. So yeah, she would be great.
Yeah. Well, Jessica, thank you so much for your time today. You've been very generous. I try to keep these to about 30 minutes, and we've in a very enjoyable and informative way, we've blown past that.
Yeah, I was probably talking too much. It was
no, not at all. I think there's some, obviously work and Bridgewater commonalities between us that we just really dove into. So it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, no, this was fun. This is the highlight of my day. Now I'm gonna go into like spreadsheets or something. So.
Well, Jessica McNeill, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you to our audience for watching our professional conversation with Jessica. You can find Jessica's conversation on our website, peopleinfundraising.com. And I will be posting Jessica's interview this month. So be on the lookout for that on my LinkedIn account. And thank you for participating today, Jessica. And thank you for everyone's time. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.